Hi everybody, this is Linda Nelson. How are you doing? I promised I would come on here and do little excerpts from the book I wrote. This book is a culmination of a promise I made to my mom to write all the stories about her life, and it took a while. I promised her again just before she passed. She would remind me that she told me a lot of things that she didn't tell a lot of other people, and she would have liked to write them down herself, but she didn't feel confident enough to do so. But she knew that I could, and so I promised her I would write these stories for her. And this is the culmination of the book. I know it's backwards on the video, but it's called Judith Valentine, Recollections of a Lifetime by Linda Nelson, her daughter. And I will start off by reading an excerpt about the time when she had my little sister, the littlest sister, Susie. It was kind of tumultuous, and just to set a little record here, I was 5 when Susie was born. My mom had placenta previa, and in those days they didn't have as good medical treatment as they do now. So I will start off with that, and I will read excerpts, and bear with me. Thank you. So one evening I had been playing with Gail in our room when I heard Mom let out the loudest scream. I had never heard her scream like that in my whole life. I ran out of my bedroom down the hall, and I opened the door. There was blood everywhere. I will never forget it. She didn't want me to see that. She screamed at me to get out. I froze for a few moments, like that, and she kept telling me, get out, and I just stared at her, crouched down, and looked at the blood. She screamed at me to go get Mrs. Rice, our neighbor, and her best friend. I ran as fast as my little legs could carry me. Mrs. Rice came over, they got my father, and Mrs. Rice took Gail and Gary home with her and me. She fed us dinner. I'm sure there were beets that night. It was incredible, but I remember those beets. If the evening wasn't bad enough, they had those damn beets. The one food I cannot stand. And fortunately, Mrs. Rice didn't make me eat them. We ate in her basement, and she made a place for us to sleep. My father took my mom to the hospital. It would be about a month before we could get to see our mom again. They didn't allow children to make visits to hospital patients in those days, but they did give her a chance, maybe twice in a month, to call us. We missed her so much, and when we got those phone calls, each of us lined up to wait our turn to speak to Mom for a brief time that we were allowed. Finally, it was time for Susan to be delivered through emergency C-section. It was a moment of life or death for both of them. It was Susie's time to come into the world, so the doctors rushed to Mom's hospital bed. They quickly sedated her and wheeled her into the emergency room. Mom died on the operating table at least once. She had an out-of-body experience she remembered through the years. Mom looked down on the table, which she was being operated on. She saw herself lying on the surgical table, surrounded by doctors and nurses that were frantically working to restart her heart. She saw the surgical implements on the tray. She remembers scalpels and gauze, and some were bloody. There was blood all over and the sheets surrounding her. She clearly saw each of those instruments, and she watched, transfixed above her body, to see herself in such a state. And until then, nothing. Until she woke up, exhausted, waiting for the news of her baby. At that point, she remembered looking down at her body, and it would be a while before she was strong enough to hold our Susie. They kept her in the hospital for a couple weeks after that. During her follow-up visit with the doctor, she mentioned that she had seen him and the nurses working on her. She described what she saw, including the instruments. The doctor was in disbelief in the operating room. I don't know how many people she told that story to. I know that she told that to me many times. Susie was born on the 11th of December. Our dad came home and told us. We were so excited. but we couldn't wait to see our baby sister. But it would be another 2 weeks on Christmas Day before Mom and Susie would come home. Grandma Helen came over on Christmas Day. She stayed with us while Dad went to the hospital to bring Mom and Susie home to us. Grandma gave Gail and me each a doll that walked with us when we held their hands. We heard the car pull up. Grandma lined us up to welcome Mom by the door. She reminded us Mom would need rest and for us to be on our best behavior. We waited. We held our breath. Gail and I held hands, and we all had big smiles on our faces. The door opened, and there was Mom holding our little baby sister Susie, who was wrapped up in a blanket. Mom was so happy to see all her babies waiting for her. We were so excited, waiting for the moment when we could really get some good hugs and kisses in and have a good look at our baby sister Susie. So that's just one of the stories in here. There's a lot about Susie's birth that I talk about, including when my grandfather died when I was about 3. My mom had asked him for a sign by sending her another baby. And so Susie was really, for all intents and purposes, Susie was the miracle baby in our family. I hope you enjoy this book. I'll put the link to purchase it in the comments. Thank you for listening to my excerpts. Thank you for all of you who have bought this book so far. There are stories about my mom growing up in Vermont when she was a little girl visiting her grandparents. And she also grew up in Charter Oak Terrace, where she went to high school in Hartford, Connecticut. So there's a lot of New England references there as well. I look forward to hearing your comments about reading it. Keep in mind that my mom's life, though it was filled with a lot of really cool, happy stories, there was also many difficulties and tragedies in her life. And I think I like to say that in spite of things that were negative that were passed on to us, there was also tremendous strength passed on through the generations, which I found as I have been researching my family history itself. But that's for another story, and you all have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.